the primary sex organ of the male reproductive system is the testis. As we know, the testis is located extra-abdominal in a cavity called scrotum. The whole of the sperm is divided into three parts. Here you can see the head, a very short neck, middle piece, very important, and a tail. If menstrual cycle takes place in primates, estrous cycle will take place in non-primates. So that you should remember. Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to yet another session, that is the revision class for 2nd PUC Biology, Chapter 2 called Human Reproduction. Myself, B. Shobharani from the Department of Biology, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, the Temple of Excellence in Mysuru. What am I going to do in this particular session? I am going to discuss about the very important concepts that are going to come for your 2nd PUC examination. And this is a very important chapter from examination point of view because the weightage of marks for this particular chapter is 11 marks. So it's a huge marks. So we must understand what are the important concepts that are going to be asked in your coming examination. Moving on to the first slide. Let us discuss about the hormonal control that is going to happen in human beings. As we all know that the hypothalamus, this is a flow chart that shows you about the hormonal control of the human beings. So hypothalamus, which is called the master of master gland, is going to control the anterior pituitary, and the anterior pituitary produces FSH and LH, and here you can see the FSH is going to act on Sertoli cells, which are going to nourish the developing germs, that is the male sex cells. And here you can see the Leydig cells, which is very important because they are the one which is going to produce the male hormone called androgens. So this is just a flow chart depicting about the hormonal control in human beings. Moving on to the next very important concept, which is very important because they are going to ask like what is menstrual cycle, explain the phases of menstrual cycle. So the stages of menstrual cycle, here you can see the first stage is the menstruation stage, which is going to last for 1 to 5 days, and here you can see the follicular phase where the Graafian follicle is going to develop, and when the completely developed Graafian follicle happens on the 14th day of the menstrual cycle, there is a release of the ovum, which is a very important event in the menstrual cycle, which is called ovulatory phase, and the process of expulsion of ovum from the mature Graafian follicle is called ovulation. And next comes the luteal phase, and next comes the that is the luteal phase, where we can see again the development of the follicle cells, and that is how, as we all know, that the menstrual cycle lasts for 28 days. So there are 4 phases, that is the first phase is called as menstrual phase, second phase is called the follicular phase, third phase is called the ovulatory phase, and the last one is called as the luteal phase. So this is a very important concept from examination point of view. There is a diagrammatic representation also which is asked about the menstrual cycle. So you must be aware of the theoretical part of this concept called menstrual cycle as well as the diagrammatic representation of the menstrual cycle. Then moving on to the male reproductive system. As we know, human beings are sexually reproducing viviparous animals. So the human beings have, that is the male human being has the male reproductive system. So what are all the parts that are included in the male reproductive system? As we know that the primary sex organ of the male reproductive system is the testis. As we know, the testis is located extra-abdominal in a cavity called scrotum. And here you can see the scrotum, that is a pair of testes, and here each testis is made up of around 250 compartments called testicular lobules. And as I said, the testis is located extra-abdominal in case of male, and it's in a pouch called scrotum. Then each testis is lined by highly coiled structures called seminiferous tubules, which is lined by 2 types of cells, that is the male sperm cells and the Sertoli cells. It is the male sperm cells which is going to develop into sperms, and the Sertoli cells is going to nourish the developing sperm cells. And as here we can see, if the primary sex organ is testis, that is, the male reproductive system includes external genitalia, primary sex organ and secondary sex organs. So what are all the important parts that are included under secondary sex organ? That is the accessory ducts. What are the accessory ducts? The very word itself will tell you, the ducts which carry the secretions. Like for example, we have the rete testis, vas efferentia, epididymis and vas deferens. So the primary sex organ is the testis, which includes again the secondary sex organs like the accessory duct system, which includes rete testis, vas efferentia, epididymis and vas deferens. Moving on to the accessory glands, very, very important. We have the prostate gland and the seminal vesicles and the corpus gland. Corpus gland is also called as what? Bulbourethral glands. These are the important parts that are included under the male reproductive system. Anyhow, in the coming slides, you can see the diagram of the male reproductive system depicting all these parts that are included. Then moving on to the female reproductive system. As we know, sexes are separate in human beings, where male has a male reproductive system and female has a female reproductive system. If testis is the primary sex organ in case of males, ovary is the primary sex organ in case of females. So the female reproductive system includes external genitalia, primary sex organs and secondary sex organs. The very word itself will tell you, the secondary sex organs are those which is going to assist the primary sex organs in carrying on a very important function in case of females. So here external genitalia includes as I said, ovaries are the primaries. A pair of ovaries forms the primary sex organ. External genitalia includes the mons pubis, labia majora and labia minora, clitoris, urethra and vagina. These come under which part? That is the external genitalia. Then secondary sex organs includes the accessory duct system and the accessory glands. As we all know that females, the mammary glands are part and parcel of the female reproductive system. Though it is not going to directly involved, it's not a part of female reproductive system, but it indirectly helps in the process of reproduction. Hence, even this plays a very great role in females. And the accessory duct system includes the oviducts, a pair of oviducts which is also called as fallopian tube, and the uterus which is also called as womb, where exactly the implantation takes place. That is, the blastocyst is going to come and attach itself to the endometrium wall of the uterus, where we use the word called pregnancy. Then the cervix. So these are all, and the accessory glands, I said, mammary gland is not directly involved, but indirectly it is going to assist the female reproductive system in many carrying on various functions. Then moving on to the very important part, as we know, there is a change in the pattern of question paper where, as I already discussed in the previous revision class, the blueprint of the question paper, as we all know that the whole of the question paper pattern is changed, where we have part A, part B, part C and part D, where part A includes that is part 1 and part 2 in part A, where the first part A, that is part A1, includes the multiple choice questions or MCQs. So as we all know, each chapter we have around many good number of MCQs, but totally for your exam in your question paper, there are 15 MCQs that are asked and 5 fill in the blanks. So I have just given an example like how the MCQs appear regarding particularly from this particular chapter. Like if you are through with your concepts, I think definitely you'll be able to answer any good number of MCQs with the correct answer. So moving, I have just given only one example to make you understand like what type of MCQs are being asked in your examination regarding this particular chapter called Human Reproduction, which carries a weightage of 11 marks. So the first movements of the fetus are observed during which month of the pregnancy? As we know, human beings, the gestation period is 9 months. So in that particular 9 months of gestation period, in which month of pregnancy do we observe the first movements of the fetus? Is it first trimester, 5th month, 2nd trimester and 6th month? Where obviously it is, the answer is what? 5th month. So in the 5th month, we observe the mother will feel the movements of the baby or the developing fetus. So the answer is what? The option C is the right answer. So like this, but as I said, you must understand the options that are given for MCQs for answering the right question. So you need to understand what happens in all this. First trimester means the first 3 months. So like that you must be able to analyze the options, then only you'll be able to land at the right answers, particularly in MCQs. And as I said, scoring is very much important for you all. As you all know, this is second PUC is a turning point in your exam, in your life, and moreover many of you would be like to write this competitive exams like NEET. So every mark matters a lot for you all. So you should be very careful while marking the MCQ. So think twice before answering the right answer. So I have just given one example to make you understand how the MCQs appear regarding particularly about this particular chapter. Moving on to the questions. So in this particular session, I have framed the questions that have been frequently asked in the previous examination. So these are the ones like which are repeatedly asked in your question paper. So that is the reason why I have given this very important diagram where it is asked, draw neat label diagram of human sperm. As we all know that human sperm is the male gamete which takes part in the process of reproduction. So this is the diagram of the male reproductive, or you can call it as the male gamete, that is the sperm. So here the whole of the sperm, here you can see it measures around 25 to 50 microns in length, and the whole of the sperm is divided into 3 parts. Here you can see the head, a very short neck, middle piece, very important, and a tail. As we all know that sperm is motile, whereas ovum is stationary. The sperm has to move towards the ovum to fuse with the ovum to help in a very important process to happen, that is called fertilization. So tail facilitates the movement of the sperm to move towards the ovum. So the whole of the sperm is divided into 3 very important parts. What are they? Head, a short neck, middle piece, and the tail. Now, what is that it is included in the head? Head is a very important part of the sperm, which is having an elongated nucleus which contains the chromosomal material. And you can see there the head of the chromosome is covered by a cap-like structure called acrosome, which is very important because it secretes certain lytic enzymes, which is very important for piercing into the ovum to facilitate the process of fusion of the gametes to happen. And here you can see the whole of the sperm is covered by an envelope called plasma membrane. And you can see a very short neck. Then comes the middle piece. I think in this diagram you can observe the middle piece has so many structures like this. What are they? They are mitochondria. What is mitochondria? Mitochondria is called as the powerhouse of the cell which generates energy. You might ask like why this energy is required? Energy source for swimming, as I said, motility. Only when the sperms are motile, only then they can reach the ovum. And what is that which facilitates the motility of the sperm? It is the energy that is released through mitochondria. Hence, you can see good number of mitochondrial cells in the middle piece. Then comes the tail as usual for the motility. So this diagram is very important from the examination point of view, which is see here it is given, and this is a 3-marker question, because if at all they ask describe with a neat label diagram, then you have to describe. Here they have just asked draw neat label diagram, and labeling the parts of a diagram is very much important because unlabeled diagram or unlabeled illustrations carry 0 marks. So you must be careful to at least minimum for 3-marker question 8 labelings is a must. So make sure that once you draw the diagram neatly, bring all the labelings to one side. As you all know in biology, diagrams play a very important role, and it is also the scoring part in your examination. Hope you have understood the structure of the sperm. Moving on to the next question, distinguish between menstrual cycle and estrous cycle. So as we know, menstrual cycle is a very important reproductive cycle in the females. So we need to understand what is menstrual. I already have explained what is menstrual cycle. It is the female reproductive cycle that is seen in human, apes, and monkeys. So what is this menstrual cycle? How do you define the word called menstrual cycle? The cyclical changes in the activities of ovary and accessory ducts as well as hormones of the female primates. If menstrual cycle takes place in primates, estrous cycle will take place in non-primates. So that you should remember. Like female primates, like what? Monkeys, apes, and human beings. Hope you have understood. What do you mean by menstrual cycle? So this is a 2-marker question. Distinguish means what? Differentiate menstrual cycle from estrous cycle. Then what is estrous cycle? The cyclical activities of ovaries and accessory ducts as well as hormones of female non-primates is called estrous cycle. Or you can also call it as the reproductive cycle seen in the female non-primates, or the reproductive cycle that is seen in the primates, you call it as menstrual cycle, or the reproductive cycle seen in the non-primates is called as what? It is called as estrous cycle. Hope you have understood. Question number 3, that is for 2-marker question. Let me move on to the 4th question. So this is a split question. So it's like even for 3-marker question or 5-marker question, you may get a split question. What is split question? For example, for 3-marker question, they might ask 2-marker question 1 and 1-marker question 1. Whereas for 5-marker question, you may get it for 3 plus 2. For 3-marker, 2 plus 1. For 5-marker, 3 plus 2. So now we'll see how the marks are distributed. Why is oxytocin necessary for parturition? What is parturition? Parturition is nothing but childbirth. What is oxytocin? Very, very important hormone, which is also called as birth hormone. It is also called as birth hormone. It is released during the time of delivery or parturition. And it causes what? Rigorous contraction of the uterus, so much so that the baby is expelled out. And that is what we call it as delivery or childbirth. So why is oxytocin necessary for parturition? Second question, list any 4 hormones secreted by placenta. What is placenta? Placenta is a maternal connection between the developing fetus and the mother. So placenta plays a very great role. It also acts as an endocrine gland. Not only it is a maternal connectivity between the mother and the fetus, but also it acts as an endocrine hormone. You may wonder how come even placenta is acting as an endocrine hormone when it is not an endocrine gland. But at times, particularly during the time of parturition or childbirth, here you can see. Now let me move on to the first question. Why is oxytocin necessary for parturition? Answer is oxytocin acts on the uterine muscle. To be very frank, oxytocin is not released by posterior pituitary. Instead, it is received by the hypothalamus only at the time of childbirth. At the time of childbirth, oxytocin, there is what we call fetal ejection reflex, which instigates the hypothalamus to release oxytocin, and that oxytocin is received by the posterior pituitary. And the posterior pituitary will release this hormone. It doesn't secrete the hormone. Instead, it just receives the hormone. Hence, oxytocin is also called as neuroendocrine hormone, because posterior pituitary does not produce this hormone. Instead, it just receives the hormone from the hypothalamus. As I already said, hypothalamus is called master of master gland, where pituitary is called as master gland. Right? There is somebody to control pituitary, and it is none other than hypothalamus. Next, and causes what? Stronger uterine contractions, which in turn stimulates further secretion of oxytocin. So oxytocin plays a very, very important role in causing rigorous contraction so that the childbirth will take place. Next, list any 4 hormones. This is very, very important. You can put a star for this question. It is like a mandatory question which is usually asked in your paper. List any 4 hormones secreted by placenta. What are the hormones? Human chorionic gonadotrophin, it is called, and the short form abbreviation is HCG. H stands for human, C stands for chorionic, and G stands for gonadotrophin. Then human placental lactogen, HPL. H stands for what? Human, P stands for placental, L stands for lactogen. Then progesterone and estrogen. So these are the 4 hormones which play a very great role in the process of parturition, and that's why we call even the placenta also acting as an endocrine gland. Next, moving on to a very important question, differentiate between menarche and menopause. In simple words, if you want to define or explain what is menarche, the onset of menstruation, or once the female reaches puberty, she will have her menstrual cycle, and the onset or the beginning of the menstrual cycle, we call it as menarche. What is menopause then? The stoppage, the cessation or stopping of the menstrual cycle. So once the female reaches 50 years of old, the menstrual cycle stops, and that is called as menopause. Onset, you call it as menarche. stoppage or cessation is called as menopause. Now let us see menarche. The first menstruation begins at puberty in a girl is called menarche. As I already said, explained, menstrual cycle is a reproductive cycle seen in primates which lasts for how many days? 28 to 29 days, and which has already I explained, and also you might have studied in your theory classes the 4 very important phases, that is the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, the ovulatory phase, and the luteal phase. Luteal phase is also called a secretory phase. Now, as we all know, during one menstrual cycle, only one ovum is released. Very, very important, right? And that is through what? A process called oogenesis. Then menopause. What is menopause? In female human beings, menstrual cycle ceases, stops. Why it stops? All the hormone secretion will also decrease. So obviously, she will not have her menstrual cycle, and that is called as menopause. Moving on to the next very important diagram, that is the female reproductive system. This is a very, very important diagram which is asked in your examination. So make sure you learn the diagram with the labelings. See, here you can see the beautiful picture of the female reproductive system. Already I explained in the flow chart. That is, the female reproductive system consists of the primary sex organ called ovaries, a pair of ovaries you can see, then the accessory ducts and the external genitalia. Here you can see the uterine, here you can see the pair of ovaries. Here can you all see this, the finger-like projection which is called as infundibulum, like finger-like projection. Like if you really see, if it is like this. So when you stretch both of your arms, it looks like that. And here you can see, this is the fallopian tube. Here this particular part is called as what? Isthmus. And this is called ampulla. Ampullary isthmic region is the region where the ova is landing. And thereon, when the sperm comes and meets the ova at that particular junction, then the fusion will happen, where we use a very important word called fertilization. So here you can see, and this is what we call it as uterus. Okay, and uterus is lined by 3 very important layers. Here you can make out the outermost layer is called perimetrium, and the middle layer is called myometrium, and the very, very important inner layer is called endometrium. Endometrium plays a very great role during the process of implantation. What is implantation? Pregnancy. So once the zygote develops into a blastocyst, it rolls down the womb or uterus and gets itself attached to the endometrium wall, where we use the word called implantation or pregnancy. Then here you can see the cervix and the cervical canal and the female genitalia called vagina. So this is very important diagram. And see, here you can see isthmus, ampulla, infundibulum together forms the fallopian tube, or it is also called as what? Oviduct. So make sure you draw this beautiful diagram, and particularly whenever you draw the diagrams in examination, NCERT NCERT textbook diagrams only you are supposed to draw, because there are many sources of learning nowadays, and there are a good number of different types of diagrams, but you are supposed to draw the diagrams that are given in your NCERT textbook. Then moving on to the next question, describe the role of oxytocin hormone in parturition. Already I explained the release of oxytocin from the maternal pituitary is triggered by fetal ejection reflex. Oxytocin acts on the uterine muscle and causes what? Stronger uterine contractions, which in turn stimulates further secretion of oxytocin. The stimulatory reflex between the uterine contraction and oxytocin secretion continues till what time? Resulting in stronger and stronger contractions, and this leads to the expulsion. Expulsion is throwing out of the baby from the vagina. Baby out of the uterus through the birth canal, what we call vagina. So that is, describe the role of oxytocin hormone in parturition, which is asked for a 3-marker question. Then moving on to the next question, during spermatogenesis, in which cells first meiotic division occurs? So what is spermatogenesis? It's a process of formation of sperm from the seminiferous, from the testis. You use the word called spermatogenesis. Primary spermatocytes. During spermatogenesis, in which cells the first meiotic cell division occurs? Primary spermatocyte, which gives rise to 2 secondary spermatocytes, and each secondary spermatocyte will give rise to 2 haploid sperms. Primary spermatocytes will have how many chromosomes? 46. but at the time of formation of secondary spermatocyte, it is reduced to 23. As we know that it is haploid. This is diploid. So primary spermatocyte is diploid. Here it is haploid. Haploid means what? Half of the number. Next, write the role of the following cells: Sertoli cells, Leydig cells. As I already said, testis is the primary sex organ in male reproductive system, and each testis is lined by highly coiled structures called seminiferous tubules. And each seminiferous tubule is lined by two types of cells. One is called the sperm mother cells and the Sertoli cells. So what is the role played by Sertoli cells? Sertoli cells provide the nutrition to the germ cells during spermatogenesis. Then what are Leydig cells? In between the seminiferous tubules, there is a space, empty space called interstitial space. Okay, so the cells that are there in the interstitial space, they are called as interstitial cells or Leydig cells, which is very important in production of a male hormone called androgen. Androgen is nothing but what we use the word called testosterone. So secretes male sex hormone, that is androgen or testosterone. This is also very important. And as I said, related to all these concepts, you may get a good number of questions for MCQs also, that is for the multiple choice questions. So all the concepts what you study in this particular chapter is very, very important. As I already said in the beginning, it carries a weightage of how many marks? 11 marks. So moving on to the next question. List the functions of human placenta. Already I told in the previous slide, placenta acts as an endocrine gland producing four very important hormones, that is HCG, HPL, progesterone and estrogen. Other than that, what is the other role played by the placenta? The placenta facilitates the supply of oxygen. As I already said, it is a maternal connectivity between the mother and the fetus. So it provides what? Supply what? Oxygen and nutrients to the developing embryo. Other than that, not only supplying, it is also responsible for removal of the waste that are produced in the fetus, that is carbon dioxide and even excretory materials produced by the embryo. So these are very, very important functions of placenta. Other than that, as I already said, it acts as an endocrine gland. How? By producing four very important hormones like HCG, HPL, estrogen and progesterone. Next, moving on to question number 11. Write the accessory ducts found in male reproductive system. As I said, what do you mean by accessory? The one which is going to help the primary sex organ, that is the testes. So what are they? Rete testis, vas efferentia, epididymis and vas deferens. Moving on to the next question. What is fetal ejection reflex? So this is a very important question from examination point of view, which is usually asked in your question paper. What is fetal ejection reflex? The signals for parturition. Parturition, already I told, childbirth, originate from the fully developed fetus and the placenta, which induces what? Mild uterine contractions called fetal ejection reflex. So thereon, oxytocin is more produced and thereby there is rigorous contraction leading to the childbirth. Next, sketch and label diagrammatic view of male reproductive system. Already I told, the previous slide I explained about female reproductive system. This is the male reproductive system. As I already said, male reproductive system consists of the primary sex organ, that is a pair of testes which is located extra-abdominal in a pouch-like structure called scrotum, which maintains the lower temperature than the body temperature, so that to facilitate what? A very important process called spermatogenesis. So what are the accessory ducts? Already I explained, that is rete testis, vas efferentia, epididymis and vas deferens. What are the accessory glands? The accessory glands include a pair of seminal vesicle, a prostate gland and a bulbourethral gland. And here you can see the urethra, then the foreskin, glans, penis. So this is the diagram of the male reproductive system, and make sure you draw a beautiful diagram and bring all the labelings to us. So these are like guarantee questions in your question paper. So it might be either they might ask female reproductive system diagram or the male reproductive system. So if you are through with these two diagrams, it is like you are through with your 5 marks. Let me move on to the next very important question. Draw a label diagram of the sectional view of the human mammary gland. So any 6 relevant labelings. As I said, Mammary glands, female human being is characterized by a pair of mammary gland which is also called as breast. So here we can, and it is very, very important organ as it produces milk to nourish. Immediately once the child is born, the infant is fed with the mother's milk, and as we all know pretty sure, mother's milk is, the first mother's milk is called as it's called as colostrum, which contains a very important antibody called IgA. So whatever immunity the baby develops first in its lifetime, it is through the mother's milk, that is the colostrum, because it contains what? IgA. So mammary gland plays a very great role even in the children. Mammary gland plays a very great role as it produces milk, which is important to feed the young ones. So here you can see the mammary lobule, which is lined by a good number of alveoli. Then you can see the mammary duct, then the ampulla, lactiferous ducts. So here you can see the nipple, areola, muscles between ribs, and pectoralis major muscles. So this is the diagram, like it might also be asked in your examination. Next, write the schematic representation of spermatogenesis. So this is a very important schematic representation. As I already said, once the male attains the puberty, then the spermatogenesis will start taking place in the male reproductive organ, that is the primary sex organ called testis. So at puberty, you can see this is called spermatogonia. Spermatogonia. So the more number of spermatogonia are produced, and we can differentiate the spermatogenesis into 3 phases. Phase of multiplication, phase of growth, and phase of maturation. So this particular we call it as phase of multiplication, where we see good number of spermatogonia are produced. They increase in size with accumulation of more nutrients in the cytoplasm. And the primary spermatocyte will have 46 chromosomes. So it is diploid. As I already said, this primary spermatocyte which is diploid will undergo first meiotic division to produce what? 2 spermatocytes. And the second spermatocyte undergoes second meiotic division to form how many? 4 spermatocytes. But here very important event has to happen. It undergoes morphological changes to become a sperm, and that is called spermiogenesis. So these are the words which are usually asked. So what is spermiogenesis? That the morphological transformation that happens, the spermatids are converted into motile sperms, is called as spermiogenesis. Thereon, once the sperms are formed, they are embedded in the seminiferous tubules and they are released from the seminiferous tubules, and that is called as what? Spermiation. That is called as spermiation. So these two are the very important terms which you should know, and that is also very important for you to understand this whole process of spermatogenesis. So they have just asked you to write the schematic, not description. So you must be very thorough with the schematic representation of this spermatogenesis, which is a very important process, where it is a process of production of male gamete called sperm. Next, split question. Write the 2 events that occur in the ovary and uterus during the follicular phase of menstrual cycle. Ovary, the primary follicle in the ovary grow to become a fully matured Graafian follicle, and the endometrium of uterus regenerates through proliferation. So this very important event is going to happen, and that is the reason why we call it as follicular phase or proliferative phase also, right? Moving on to the next question. Name the finger-like projections on trophoblasts that appear during implantation. What do you call that finger-like projections? Chorionic villi. Chorionic villi along with maternal muscles form what we call it as placenta, which is a maternal connectivity. Chorionic villi are what? The finger-like projections that appear on the trophoblast. They, along with the maternal muscles and blood vessels, together constitutes a very important connectivity called placenta. Next question, number 7. In which site of fallopian tube does fertilization take place? I already told you all when I was describing about the female reproductive system, the place or the location where exactly the fertilization. What is fertilization? Fusion of the male gamete with the female gamete. That is ovum with the sperm. Which junction? That is called ampullary isthmic junction. Next, what is implantation? Very important. Already I told you. So after the fertilization, The zygote, which is a single diploid cell, will undergo a series of mitotic cell division to become what? To become what? It undergoes cleavage, morula, and blastula. So once it is getting transformed into blastocyst, then it rolls down the fallopian tube and gets attached itself to the endometrium wall. The attachment of the blastocyst to the endometrium wall of uterus is called what? Implantation. What is implantation in other words called? Pregnancy. This is a very important term. Like in everyday life, we use this word called pregnancy, but we oftenly use this word called implantation. But what is implantation? Is nothing but attached. Thereon, the development of the fetus will take place. As I said, the gestation period is what? In human beings, it is 9 months. So completely during that 9 months, the formation of complete development of the fetus will take place. Next, name the hormone released by the ovary in the later phase of pregnancy. That is relaxin. Moving on to the next question, briefly explain sex determination in human beings. As we all know, sexes are separate in human beings, but we all know that always the females are blamed for having a girl child. But to be very frank, it is the male who is responsible for the birth of a male child. That is, usually we blame the mother for bearing a girl child and not a male child. But it is the father who is responsible for the birth of a male child. So what is the sex determination? As we all know that mother XX, father XY. So if 1X from mother, 1X from father comes, then the birth of a girl child will take place. And if 1X from mother, only if Y comes from father, then the birth of a male child will take place. But obviously every time the females are blamed for having a girl child. But who is responsible for the birth of a girl child? It is the male. So let us see what is this. The sex of the child is determined at the time of fertilization. The sex chromosomes of the male parent are X and Y. 2 chromosomes are there. So hence the male individual produces what? 2 types of sperms carrying 1X and 1Y. So we use the word called heterogametic. Because it is XY, we use the word called heterogametic. And in female, it is XX. So we call it as what? Homogametic. Same. Homo means same, hetero means different. But whereas the female parent has XX chromosomes and she produces only 1 ovum carrying what? X chromosome. Hence, female is called homogametic. After the fusion of the sperm and ovum, the zygote would carry either XX or XY chromosome. The zygote carrying XX chromosomes would develop into female child and the zygote carrying XY chromosome would develop into male child. Next, 21. This is a very important question. What is so very significant of the 14th day of the menstrual cycle? It is that particular day where the release of ovum is going to take place. Hence, it's a very significant phase we can call. Ovulation takes place on the 14th day of menstrual cycle. Why? Graafian follicle mature and ruptures usually on the 14th day due to rapid secretion of LH. So it is also called as LH surge. It is also called, what do you mean by LH surge? On the 14th day of the menstrual cycle, there is a high release of LH. What is LH? Luteinizing hormone. So which will initiate the mature Graafian follicle to rupture and release the ovum. And what do you call that event? Release of ovum is called ovulation. Moving on to the next. What is colostrum? Already I told how important the mother's first milk is. The milk secreted by the mammary glands for the initial few days soon after parturition or delivery of the child is called colostrum, which has what? Very important antibody called IgA. Next, name the hormone secreted by corpus luteum, progesterone. What is ovulation? Already I explained a good number of times. The release of ovum or secondary oocyte from the Graafian follicle of the ovary into the fallopian tube is called ovulation. Next, name the cells that secrete androgens. Already I told you. Interstitial cells or Leydig cells. Next, what is menopause? Already I explained. The onset of menstruation or menstrual cycle, we use the word called menarche, which starts immediately after the girl attains puberty or maturity. The stoppage or cessation of the menstrual cycle, we use the word called menopause. So, the cessation or stoppage of menstrual cycle or ovulation in the female around 45 to 55 years is called menopause. Name the physical and physiological connection between maternal body and embryo, that is placenta. Hope you all have understood the important concepts what I have discussed in this particular session regarding a very important chapter, chapter 2 of your second PUC biology, that is human reproduction, which carries a weightage of 11 marks. So, dear students, make sure you are through with the concepts of this particular chapter, which is definitely going to help you to gain good number of marks, because having a high weightage, 11 marks is not a small marks for you all. Hope you have understood all the important concepts what I have explained. Maybe like these are the ones which are usually asked in the examination. Thank you.